Let's do this.
Live from Kentucky and Louisiana, two Marines, one mission. This is Sense and Senseless. From the hills to the bayou, stories collide. Brothers in arms, now we're side by side. Sense and Senseless, we cut through the noise. Two Southern Marines with that rebel voice. Grab a seat, pour a drink, let's make some sense. Or none at all, it just depends. Sense and Senseless.
Welcome back to Sense and Senseless. I'm Bryan. Jason isn't with me on this one tonight. So we did ran pretty long. I thought it was going to be able to get everything I wanted to get into it, but that didn't work. So tonight I'm going to do the portion that we didn't do the night before. Tonight we'll discuss how we voluntarily isolated ourselves with technology, trading real connections for screens, while elites tighten their grip on essentials like our food supply, potentially starving us out through control and depopulation measures. We'll expose the historical abuses, shocking experiments conducted on vulnerable American citizens, often without their knowledge or consent, and how one major U.S. company knowingly exported tainted blood products overseas for profit, putting lives at risk. So let's do a little game called Let's Go Down the Road of Bryan's Fucking Thinking. First on the road of Bryan's thinking was depopulation. While I was digging and looking for content last week, I ran across a video that talked about the 1974 Kissinger report and how it was used to as a plan to depopulate Africa, and that got me pretty interested. So I'm going to share that video with you guys, and then we'll talk about it.
There is a policy of the American government. It's called the Kissinger Report, which was produced in the mid-70s when Henry Kissinger was involved with the government. And it explicitly states, which to this day, it remains the official policy of the American government. It has not changed. It may not be implemented by Trump, but it remains the same. That the purpose of the foreign policy in Africa was to reduce the population. So to give aid to countries in Africa, not clean water and schooling and things like that, but contraception and abortion, in order to shrink the population of Africa, because they have great mineral resources there.
That sounds diabolical.
It is, yes.
That sounds like something conceived in the mind of Margaret Sanger.
Yeah, definitely. And so at the time, Kissinger and those involved with the Carter administration wanted to shrink the population, make sure that the Africans do not develop and do not use the resources for themselves, because we in the States, we need them. There is a concerted effort of foreign powers to control the population of Africa. Africa is a huge continent, could feed thousands more people, but the policies of the West, especially in Europe. For example, between 1990 and the year 2000, the United States, Canada, and Europe contributed about $6 billion in contraceptives, not to help the people, not to give clean water, clean food. That is
Not to fight malaria, for example.
No, of course, perish the thought, never.
Yeah.
Let them die. That's the whole idea. So in our work in HLI, we denounced this reality to make the Africans aware that they have to defend themselves against the influence of foreign powers.
Is it just the United States, or do you believe that China is also playing a role in jockeying for the resources of Africa?
China is playing a major role because China is buying property in Africa. For example, in Mozambique, which is a Portuguese-speaking language country, they when Portugal was in charge of Mozambique, they used to export rice. Now they are importing rice from China. because they cannot produce. The socialism has wrecked the production of rice. And the Chinese come and buy farms. So about almost a third of Mozambique belongs to China. So I was in other countries of Africa, the same reality. In South Africa, the Chinese are buying property, buying land in Africa. So and they send their own workers, the Chinese workers. They don't employ people over the place. They send their own workers to populate and to live in the.
All right. Well, that got me thinking. Why do we have so many abortion places in the U.S.? Why people support abortion so much? And if you don't know who Margaret Sanger is, she's the one that pretty much started Planned Parenthood. And it almost looks like it's the same kind of shit they ploying over here. So that gave me a little err on the side of caution, right? So it's like, are they doing this shit here? Well, first of all, let's find out if they were even doing it in Africa. So I did some digging and I couldn't find anything that directly stated that the Kissinger report was directly related to depopulation of any country. However, I did find that the Kissinger report is real and it was declassified in 1989. The Kissinger report was commissioned in 1974 by President Richard Nixon and overseen by the security advisor Henry Kissinger. It analyzed how rapid population grows. It analyzed how rapid population growth in less developed countries, or would they say in most articles now, the less developed countries, they use an abbreviation of LDCs, could impact U.S. national security, economic interests, and global stability over the coming decades. The report's core thesis was that unchecked population growth in these regions could lead to resource shortages, political instability, civil unrest, and increased demands on U.S. aid, potentially fostering environments hostile to American interests. For example, taking control of the U.S. investments or adopting foreign policies that work against American interests. Therefore, technically, they weren't trying to depopulate Africa. They were trying to slow down the population growth. Okay. Tomato, however you want to look at it, it's one and the same. So that made me go squirrel. As I remember, there was a scandal where blood tainted with HIV was sent overseas. So I was like, was this part of this depopulation of Africa? Could they have been so sinister to where they said, you know what, we're just going to send AIDS to Africa? Or actual, the disease AIDS, not actual grain and food and shit, And what I found was, according to reports, the U.S. government didn't have anything to do with the tainted blood. It was a private company that actually did this. And so in the late 70s and early 80s, before HIV screening tests existed, blood plasma was collected commercially in the U.S. and from paid donors. So you'd go in, they'd pay you, and they'd take your plasma. I think they still do plasma today that way. Not sure. This included high-risk groups like prisoners, drug users, that's using shooting up and shit, and they can go in there and sell their plasma so they can get some more drugs and others. This plasma was used to make blood clotting factors that people with hemophilia use. And if you don't know what hemophilia is, simply put, is when you have this, your blood doesn't have the efficiency to clot. So any little cut can become really dangerous. So it's essential that they take this clotting factors, and then in simple terms, if you ever heard the term free bleeder, that's what this condition refers to as hemophilia. So going through all this made me remember a boy that had AIDS in the 90s. And if you were alive back then, you know the story. It was pretty horrible to all of us because none of us really knew what the fuck AIDS was. Well, I ain't going to say really. No one knew what AIDS was. I mean, AIDS was the cooties of our time. If somebody got, was told or labeled with AIDS, was a death sentence to us. And it scared the shit out of everyone. But this guy, Ryan White, he was a 13-year-old kid from Kokomo, Indiana. He was born with severe hemophilia. And then to manage the bleeding episodes, he relied on regular infusions of factor VIII, a clotting protein that was made from the pooled plasma that they were taking from all these people. And that sounds life saving, right? Well, it was until it fucking wasn't. In the early '80s, before anyone even knew what HIV was, I had a test for it. These factor eight batches came from thousands of donors. Like we said earlier, they were including paid ones, prisoners, drug users. And if one donor carried HIV, the whole pool could be contaminated. And poor Ron White, he got one of those fucking tainted batches. And on December 17th, 1984, during treatment for pneumonia, doctors diagnosed him with AIDS and they gave him 6 months to live. And Ryan, he ended up surviving 5 more years until April 1990, and he died at 18 from AIDS related pneumonia. And what's sad wasn't so much that he had AIDS. What's sad is we didn't understand AIDS. And if you lived during that time, once you got labeled with that shit, no one was going around you. We didn't had no idea what happened with AIDS. AIDS. I mean, you thought COVID was bad. That shit ain't had nothing on fucking AIDS. That poor man, that kid, he went through hell. The school even kicked him out. They didn't want him at school because the parents wasn't letting their kids go to school because he was there. I mean, it was awful. He was all over the news, and he was treated like a leper. I mean, I can't say enough. This poor kid went through hell. He was on television all the time, so you actually seen what he was going through, and to live like that is just had to be awful. And it just going through all this. I mean, I know this is a little off subject, but going through all this, I remembered this guy, and I looking back, and you seen how he was treated. If someone got treated like that today, I mean, everyone that was treating him bad would probably open up a fucking GoFundMe page. He'd win $2 billion. Back then, it wasn't like that. They pretty much just jumped on you. Everybody was you against them. Them against you, should I say? And I can't. He there was our boogeyman. I mean, nobody wanted it. And when we're talking about a generation that used to have chicken pox parties, right? We would just voluntarily, from our parents, go get fucking chicken pox so we can get it through our system while we were young and be done with it. I mean, and we were scared of this fucking shit. I mean, scared of it. Well, through all that, he became a national advocate, testifying before Congress, befriending celebrities like Elton John and Michael Jackson, and helping shift the public understanding of HIV spreads through blood, sex, or needles, and not hugs or in the shared classrooms or just jumping on you like cooties or something. And then his story sparked a massive change, including the Ryan White Care Act, and this still funds HIV studies today. But Ryan wasn't alone. Thousands of hemophiliacs in the U.S. estimates of say 6,000 to 10,000 got infected the same way through these products from companies like Bayer. Well, it's actually Bayer's Cutter, and it's a division of Bayer, Baxter, and others. Ryan was the face of AIDS before Magic Johnson. And when Magic Johnson come out, it was weird. All of a sudden, you didn't get AIDS. I mean, Magic Johnson come out with HIV, and it was an amazing coincidence that the medical industry found something to help HIV. When the face of the NBA was, part of it, uh, it's fucking amazing how some shit happens. But we can look at that another day. By 1983 to 84, evidence mounted that these products carried the risk of HIV, and safer heat-treated versions became available in the U.S. and in Europe. Now, here's where this shit fucking takes a turn. Some companies, notably Bayer, continued exporting the older, untreated, high-risk stock to overseas markets to avoid financial losses from destroying inventory. This was even after pulling them from the U.S. and the European markets. A 2003 New York Times article highlights exports to places like Asia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan, and Latin America, infecting hundreds of more hemophiliacs there. These exports occurred in 1984 to 1985, even as companies knew the risk and had safer alternatives. But in sub-Saharan Africa, HIV spread early and rapidly through multiple routes: sexual transmission, unsterile medical practices, between injections and infusions. Local blood supplies were often unscreened. Contaminated transfusions contributed to some infections in 1980s, but the primary sources were local and regional, not direct U.S. exports obtaining hemophilia products. So my answer, I found no evidence that points that the U.S. government deliberately shipped tainted blood to Africa as some kind of plot, to be part of this depopulation this guy was talking about. But damn sure was a profit driven failure by private companies during a terrifying new epidemic, but it wasn't a coordinated depopulation scheme. And there was some settlements that they had to go through. From what I've seen, it was around 660 million in the U.S. for in 1997 for infected philiacs. And that brings us back to broader claims of the 1974 Kissinger Report, which warned that rapid population growth in developing countries, including parts of Africa, could threaten U.S. interests through instability and resource strain. So it pushed voluntary family planning aid to slow growth, not force depopulation or anything sinister. Conspiracy theories twisted into something darker, but the document itself is about development and stability, not extermination. However, we did spend billions on Planned Parenthood in Africa after the Kissinger Report through agencies like the famous USAID. Of course, this was for the betterment of women and the people of Africa. And I'm sure there's some truth to what the guy in the video is saying. However, I couldn't substantiate its claims, but it was rather fucking interesting. So all this made me start thinking about birth rates, because I was thinking about birth rates actually before this, because I seen where the birth rates are real low. Like, and we'll go through it, but I think you're supposed to maintain 2.1 per, woman in order to replace you, the woman, and then the 0.1 for, kids that don't make it or whatnot. And that's how you just keep a stable, community or population, should I say. And we are getting close to either below it or we're below it already. And it's like, how do we reproduce ourselves? And if you think about that now, in the simplest term, that and if you're married, your wife, or you and your girlfriend, if you're not married, or fiance, whatever it is, you have to have 2 children to replace you to keep life moving. I mean, that's just what fucking life is. If you don't replace 2 people, you didn't help keep the population going. And technically, you could eventually go extinct. I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but it's the simplest form I can put it in. And once you start thinking like that, you're like, fuck. Well, I can't have more than 1 kid. It fucking costs me an arm and a leg to go to the goddamn store and feed the goddamn kid. I'm not picking at your kid, but it does feel like that sometimes. I don't give a shit what kind of parent you are. You feel the struggle, but you got to have 2 kids in order to replace yourself. And I get why we're not having kids, but is that part of depopulation too? I don't know, but we're going to talk about Planned Parenthood right now. So first, how did Planned Parenthood start? So it goes back in 1916 when Margaret Sanger, a nurse frustrated by health issues of frequent pregnancies on poor women, opened America's first birth control clinic in Brooklyn. It was raided just after 10 days, and she got arrested, but it sparked the movement. So in 1921, she founded the American Birth Control League, which evolved into Planned Parenthood in 1942. The goal was to empower women with contraceptive to plan families. So I started thinking, just bear with me, this is just how my fucking mind goes. I started thinking, was Planned Parenthood started as something good and then hijacked by the elites to create something bad? I mean, think about it. We've never seen that before, right? And then early on, this lady, Margaret Sanger, early on, we needed plenty of people. All right. So because work was hard. Think about just separate ourselves to our grandparents, our great grandparents. You needed more people back then because work was hard. Medical care and morality wasn't as good. So people didn't live as long. And people got hurt. I mean, they really got hurt. If you in the earlier days of my life, I remember when someone had a back surgery, that put them out. It wasn't no going. You did not want to have back surgery because if you got back surgery, you were done. And now, I mean, you can go have back surgery and go back to work and pretty damn quick. I don't know exactly the timing because I haven't had back surgery, but just those little things will keep somebody working. Just think about it. But now we have so much technology and shit, we need less people, right? So in 1900, the life expectancy was around 47 years old, right? 1990, 47 years old. By 1944, the life expectancy jumped up to around 65 years old, and it climbed every year since, where today we hover around 78 to 79 years old. And for you young people, if you're listening, those people living that long hold up more housing. So it keeps the housing. I'm not saying people need to die earlier, but I mean, it really does. I mean, the longer people hold on, the population stays there, but they're eventually going to die off quicker than we're going to reproduce. I don't. Okay, you just have to do the math in your head. I'm not going to try to explain that any deeper, but that's how I look at it. But the reality is, we needed less people, like I just said, due to not only people living longer, but also technology helped with the work. So we needed less laborers. And I really believe this is part of why we see abortion clinics in every poor area in states where abortions are still allowed, because they don't need a bunch of laborers. I'm not saying that's exactly why they do it, but tell me that don't make sense. We don't need as many people as we used to need. They sitting there and you and your wife have to work your ass off just to have a house and a car, yet alone be able to do something you want to do. And you got to have 2 kids to replace you. They don't need many laborers. I don't know. We'll just put abortion clinics everywhere and then we'll just kill kids. That way we don't have too many people that's going to feed off of society because we already have people feeding off society. I don't know. Do what you want with it. I know my brain's a little fucked up, but let me know what y'all think. Put it in the comments because we could be onto something right there. It could have been something that was hijacked, and we need less people. Is it as senator where, hey, look, we're not actually depopulating. Kissinger report wasn't actually depopulating. They were just, giving them contraceptives, giving them alternatives the way they don't have fucking kids. It's not depopulation. You see, they're not lying to you. That's the thing is half truths because the answer they're giving you is correct and it would hold up in the court of law, I would think. But it is part of depopulation. And when you really think about it, if you're not having enough kids to replace yourself, that's depopulation. And if you supporting that, I mean, that falls back on you. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a fucking idiot. So let's look at birth rates. In 1900, the birth rate was around 30.1 to 32.3 per 1,000 people. And the total fertility rate was roughly around 3.5 children per woman. And under the Depression era, birth rates dropped significantly during the 1930s, falling to 20.6 per 1,000 by 1930. And then the baby boom came following World War II. Birth rates rebounded strongly, and the highest number of live births occurred in 1957 with over 4.3 million births. The total fertility rate surpassed 3.5 children per woman by 1960. Late 20th century decline. Fertility rates dropped to a low point in 1980, 1.77 children per woman, due to increased contraceptive and social changes. All right, think about that. the 21st century, after a brief rise between 1995 and 2010, rates have continued to drop, hitting a record low of 10.7 per 1,000 in 2023. So they're not depopulating you guys. They're just helping you have less children. And what do I think's driving this? And I'm gonna take it in a different direction. So we're not looking at the actual how it's tied and got taken hijacked by the evil sinister guy in the story. Whatever. We're gonna take a turn from that. So what I think driving it? Well, I really believe the feminist movement, corporate greed, and Planned Parenthood all together is driving it. I don't think it's just one thing. Um, I'm all for women power, you know, but at the same time, I'm all for we here for specific things. You know, guys do certain things and women do certain things, and I'm not trying to put a woman in a box. But women are better at certain things than guys, and guys are better at certain things than women. I mean, that's just fucking. That's always been the case. And can a woman do some things that the guy does? Yes, I'm not gonna say she can't, but she's still not a dude. And dudes can do things that women. I mean, it's just physical. Yes, you might have one woman out there that can fucking whoop my. Okay, so be it. That's not the majority. You know, that's not the rule. Think about it. I mean, we can do this what if shit to the end of time, but no one wants to just look at things at the simple form of where we're at. You know, women and men, boys and girls. That's the feminist movement. Um, I really think that fucked women up, honestly, and it's not because I think women don't need rights or whatnot. I think it put women in a role to where they think so much of themselves they'll never really find the love of a guy because they don't need him. And when you don't need somebody, why the fuck did they stay around? And then you want to complain all the time that this guy ain't worth shit just because you keep telling them you don't fucking need him. A guy wants to be there, and help you grow and support you and protect you. And you telling them that you don't need him all the fucking time. Why the fuck would he want to stay around? Think about it. I mean, he needs you. I mean, my woman I found, shit, she gives me peace. That's all I fucking want in life. I mean, we don't need a whole lot from women. And I'm just saying, I see a lot of women on these damn programs and shit and then these TikToks complaining about their man and shit. Y'all need to relax. Men ain't that fucking different. I mean, men ain't that fucking difficult to deal with. Seriously. Most men don't need much. You give us fucking peace, and a little quiet, and just appreciate what we do. Most of us will give you the fucking moon. We don't need much. All right, sorry I got on that little tangent. Just the feminist movement, I really don't like. Corporate greed. Yeah, man, I don't have to tell y'all that. But Planned Parenthood, we just went over that, and I can see how they all work together. I mean, let me know what y'all think. But fast forward to today, how many abortions you think are happening each year? So globally, the World Health Organization's latest statements hold steady at around 73 million induced abortions annually. That's about 200,000 abortions a day in the world. Roughly 29% of all pregnancies end in abortion, and sadly, 45% are unsafe, mostly in developing regions, causing major complications. And in the U.S., numbers have shifted post 2022 on the Dobbs decision, which ended Roe versus Wade. That everybody was crying about. You couldn't get an abortion anymore. But the most recent data varies slightly by source. So the Guttmacher Institute reports that roughly a little over 1 million clinic provided abortions in the states without total bans in 2024. That was a tiny less than 1% increase from 2023, but up 12% from 2020. The rate is 15.4 per 1,000 women aged 15 to 44. All right. The Society of Family Planning Week Count Project estimates a higher 1.14 million nationwide in 2024, with monthly averages climbing around 88,000 in 2023 to 95,000 in 2024, and an even higher earlier in 2025, nearly 99,000 abortions monthly. 99,000 abortions monthly in the United States was the average in the first half of 2025. And a lot of them now is this medication abortion pills. You know, and they make up the majority of it. So I guess they getting this shit off of telehealth, and they flying them a pill, and they take a pill. And why are we using fucking abortion as a contraceptive? Makes no damn sense to me. We just lost responsibility of everything in life. I mean, and I'll be honest with you. I go either way. I mean, I think women should have rights and have abortions if you want to have fucking abortion. I get that. I mean, teach their own. Shit's gonna happen. I'm not, that damn wound up to where I'm gonna jump up and down if you got a fucking abortion. Having said that, you shouldn't use it as fucking contraceptive. I mean, I think that's dumb as shit. Because that's what it sounds like is happening. They just going fucking raw dog all the time, and like, fuck. I can just get a goddamn pill mailed to me. I don't need to have your fucking baby. Why would you do that? I guess they do it because we don't fucking charge them for it or something. It's probably paid for by the government. I guess if you start having to pay for that shit, it would go down quite a bit. But anyway, a little more on this shit. So which country has the most abortions? In absolute number, it's tough to pin down precisely due to reporting gaps. But estimates point to India with around 16 to 17 million annually in recent years, followed by China at about 9 to 10 million. The U.S. sits at roughly 1.1 million. By rate, 1,000 women. So when you break it down like that, places like Greenland top it at over 80 with this small population effect. So now the big question. Has Planned Parenthood affected birth rates? And in the U.S., Planned Parenthood serves millions, 2.08 million patients in their latest report, providing 9.4 million services, including over 2.2 million birth control services and 402,000 abortions in 2022 and 2023, a record high, up 2% year over year. They estimate preventing hundreds of thousands of unintended pregnancies. They estimate preventing hundreds of thousands of unintended pregnancies annually through contraception. The U.S. births rose slightly to 3.63 million in 2024, up 1%, but the fertility rate hit a record low, about 1.6 children per woman lifetime. And then the worldwide fertility has dropped dramatically from about 4 children per woman in the 1970s to 2.2 today. I get it. We don't need kids. We don't need a bunch of people. Having said that, in order for civilization to keep moving forward, we got to have fucking kids. I mean, we're going to replace them with robots. I don't know. But from what I read, this is all thanks to better this is all better to condoms, the access to contraception, education, and organizations like Planned Parenthood Global and the International Planned Parenthood Federation, which helped avert millions of unintended pregnancies yearly. The birth rate needed to maintain the current population size without relying on immigration or other factors is known as the replacement level fertility rate. In most developed countries with low infant and child mortality, the replacement level is approximately 2.1 children per woman. Why not exactly 2? Because roughly 2 children replace the 2 parents, but the extra 0.1 accounts for the slight imbalance in sex ratio at birth. More boys are born, but only females bear children. Remember that. Only females bear children. and some of the children who die before reaching reproductive age. In regions with higher mortality rates, some developing countries, the replacement level can be higher, sometimes 2.3 to 3.4 or more, to compensate for greater child mortality. They got to have more kids because they might die, because they don't have a higher medical. But globally, the replacement level averages around 2.2 to 2.3 when factoring in worldwide variations, though the standard benchmark remains 2.1 below mortality settings. Okay, so if the TFR is sustained at this level, each generation exactly replaces itself, leading to long-term population stability. Above 2.1 means gradual growth. Below it leads to eventual decline. Though population momentum, immigration, or rise in life expectancy can delay the shrinkage for decades. So maybe since we're living longer, it doesn't look like the population's going down. But like I said earlier, like most of the baby boomers and the Gen X guys are going out, and these families that only had 2 kids or 1 kid because they couldn't afford to have more than one, you might start seeing all this shit shrink. Now, I'm not going to say that's going to be an exact problem because, again, you don't need as many people because you got technology. The problem comes in is when you quit replacing the fucking human. We always, this is this is so stupid. Think about it. Why the fuck do we spend so much money chasing all these endangered fucking animals and trying to save them and sending all this money to these fucking people on television that's showing these sad ass commercials to save the fucking animals? But yet we got abortion clinics everywhere we can to fucking kill kids. And we're not even having enough kids to sustain our fucking, how you say that? Civilization. Make that make sense. That, that makes no motherfucking sense at all. Oh God. So if you got a sub-replacement fertility, anything below 2.1 is sub-replacement, eventually leading to population decline if sustained. So you got a very low fertility, often described as 1.5 children per woman. This is accelerating aging and strains on pensions, social systems, and risks, rapid workforce shrinkage. And that's the other thing you got to think about. See, you got less kids, right? Everybody knows that fucking Social Security is just fucked, right? So there's no money in that fucking system at all. No fucking money in that system. That money is getting fed by us every week or wherever you get paid to put back in the system to pay the people that's already retired because they already stole their fucking money. That's how they running this shit. It's like a fucking Ponzi scheme. The problem is it's going to fucking really kill this thing. And it's sad that I could sit here and probably research all kind of shit on how they stole money out of Social Security and this wouldn't even be hurting it. But having said that, knowing that we're supporting the Social Security money that's going out today to pay the people that retired because they stole their fucking money that was supposed to be sitting in Social Security to give it back to them when they fucking retired. Or they took that money to give it to somebody so they could vote for them, not because they were trying to buy a vote, but they were giving them welfare or, disability, should I say, because of Social Security. Something like that. So now, sorry, I got on that tangent. So think about this, all right? Think about it. If population's shrinking, and so basically we like a fucking funnel right now, right? And we got more people that's retired and less people putting into the fucking Social Security system. They can't keep up. So it's got to take money from something else to go up on your Social Security that you got to pay. And because it's not going to be, that's the one thing that won't be divided. You're going to have, I'm sorry, guys. You're going to have less people working because you're not going to need many people because of technology. We already proved that because, we doing the same thing. That's the reason why the population's pretty much at a stalemate right now. You just don't need more people. So to sum all this, more money has to go into Social Security to take up the losses that's at the top because you got more people pulling from a smaller pool of money. That's basically what I'm trying to get at. And I'm sorry I got on a big old tangent, but I think the population thing, I'm not going to say it's a huge thing and all, but I mean, we should be looking at it. People should be thinking about it. And if you're not thinking about you got to replace yourself, because most people don't, because why would you think about that? People's been here forever in our mind. They just keep reproducing. We don't even think about when we're going to go extinct, but we're worried about the fucking animals and shit. It's a fucked up place we live in. And the other thing, and it's not just Planned Parenthood and all these other places saying, you know, they're going to depopulate us, or the Kissinger report. It's not all that. Today, everybody lives through a fucking screen. You know, no one visits anybody anymore. You can't. Back when I was growing up, you just went to somebody's fucking house. You know, if you wanted to see somebody, you just went knocked on the fucking door. You know, if you wanted to go see your grandma or something, you just showed up and everybody just talked. You didn't have to call somebody and say, "Hey, look, I'm gonna come over here," or send them a fucking text. I don't understand when that started becoming rude. And I didn't think about this to the other day when I was thinking, man, there's nobody that walks around, you know, and like politicians and knocks on your door. And I thought about it. It's because nobody answers their fucking door. Period. I don't give a fuck who knocks on your door. Nobody answers their door. The door that you go in all the time, that's the only fucking door you use. The other door in your house, whether it's the front door or the back door, if somebody knocks on that motherfucker, you're not going to answer it. Or you're going to go through the door that you always use to go meet the motherfucker because nobody's supposed to knock on that door. It's fucking weird. It is one of the dumbest fucking things we created. And so we don't visit. And you got to visit. These screens are giving you a falsehood that you have a social life. Yes, you got a life through that screen on you make believe friends, but that's not living. You can't live through that screen. That is horrible. And you got to start talking to people. Alcohol sales are down. Nobody goes to bar rooms anymore. It's like, what's wrong with young people? Go fucking have fun. You know, enjoy your life a little bit. Don't worry about fucking having to sit at home and watch the goddamn screen. Trust me, you'll get to that. You know, just give it some time. Go out, have some fucking beers, you know, go to a girl, fucking ask her to dance. Figure all that shit out. You don't have to be on fucking Tinder. You know, go figure this shit out. We got the loneliest and most depressed country era right now. And everybody has it good. It's fucking unbelievable to me. You know, our poverty people in our country would live great in a lot of these third world countries. You know, we don't have it that bad. Think about it. You either listen to me on a radio, on a fucking laptop, or some kind of fucking device. That's good, dude. You got something. You're not living bad, but you got to get out there and see people. You can't be stuck in these fucking screens. You know, you just can't. We got to get back to visiting, and I'm bad at it too. You know, I really am, and it just got all of us. But anyway, sorry about ranting on that. It bothers me. You know, you get people come over. You know, they check, and then they just sitting on their phone. It's like, yeah, fuck that. But see, yesterday we had my wife's 50th birthday over here, and my brother-in-law's 70th birthday. We celebrated yesterday. And it was nice. I mean, we all had a great conversation, you know, all sitting around bullshitting, you know, having a good time. And no one was on their fucking phone. You know, it was great. It's nice to be able to do that. I mean, when you don't have somebody constantly checking their phone. Now they were taking pictures, and every now and then, you know, they might have to grab it because somebody texted them or something or whatnot. But for the most part, nobody was on their phones. And I'm telling you, having conversations is a great way to live. It really is. And we're never going to get back to where we should be until we all start talking to each other. And talking to each other through a screen versus talking to each other, talking to someone face to face is totally different. We got to be more personal than fucking screens. Anyway, so I was digging through all this shit, and I'd seen something earlier about, you know, China buying farmland in the U.S., and then that guy was talking about China buying land in in Africa when he was talking about depopulation and how Africa was going. And that reminded me of something I seen It was a interview that Pierce and Tucker had put together. I'm gonna play a video for y'all, and then we're gonna talk about it.
But it's happened throughout Europe and the United States,
Yeah.
attacking farmers. If you're looking big picture, if you're opposed to famine and you're for human flourishing and people, then you'd want to do whatever you could to have
Yes.
enough food.
I agree.
And if country by country by country, they're all attacking farmers, maybe there's a bigger anti-human agenda at work.
I just think it's a pretty dumb political agenda that's been pursued.
It's not just dumb, it's like weird.
Yeah.
Of all the groups you'd attack, why farmers?
Makes no sense.
It does make sense though, doesn't it?
Why?
Well, clearly there's an effort to reduce the human population. Look around the world, government after government after government around the world is endorsing policies that they know will reduce birth rates, is attacking agriculture, and is allowing, I don't know, drugs and food that kill people and make them less healthy. If you add that all up, you don't have to know their motives. You just look at the effects and you're like, the effect is to kill people. What is going on here?
Yeah, what is actually going on here? Hey, I trust Tucker, and I, are they trying to depopulate? I don't know, but I had to dig into this farmland shit because I don't know anything about it at all. And I've heard of other countries, buying farmland, and my thoughts after seeing something like that is, are they buying that to control our food? One day they pull it out. Kind of like, they had a handle on all our drugs and shit during COVID, which was fucking my eye opening as a son of a bitch when you realize another country controls your fucking medication. That'd be another fucking show. But it it was like, is China buying a bunch of farm property just to, fuck with us? Is it that damn bad? And if you watched the episode earlier, I mean, China had 2 biolabs just hanging out in fucking housing areas in our country. I mean, what else they got in here? So it was in big news that I'd seen that China was doing this, and like I said, and were they controlling the food? So I started asking questions, who owns America's farmlands, and more importantly, who fucking controls them? Let's trace the chains of ownership and influence from foreign entities to family farms, corporate giants, and the shadowy voting power of Wall Street's big 3. All right. First off, there's foreign countries and companies own a surprisingly a small slice of U.S. land, about 49 to 51 million acres. That's small in the grand scheme of things. It's a lot to us, but it owned roughly 2.2%, the total of 2.27 billion acres in the United States. So in the United States, we got 2.27 billion acres, and they own 49 to 51 million. So it's 2.2% of what we have. But when you zoom in on agricultural land, that's farm, forest, and pastures. The foreigners hold 45.85 million acres, which is roughly 3.5% of privately held agricultural land. So when we break it down by type, I'm sorry I'm nerding out, but I just want to go through this. The farmland was around, almost 21 million acres of foreign owned, or total, it's less than 0.9% of U.S. total land. And then in the forestries, the foreigners had 21.97 million acres, or about 1%. Non-agriculture, residential, and commercial, 3 to 5 million acres estimated, but under 0.2%. Okay. So they don't own a whole lot. That surprised me. First of all, I don't think foreigners should own any fucking property in our country. Again, that might be another episode, but they own a small percentage, and I was surprised to see that because I expected to see more. And so my assumptions were wrong. So the question is, though, I mean, so who owns the fucking land? Canada leads with 15.35 million acres, mostly forest for timber, and the Netherlands has 5.2 million in forest and cropland. It'll lead the UK and Germany follow with 2 to 3 million each, mixing forest, cropland, and pasture. China only has 0.28 million acres, tiny. It's mostly agriculture, like processing facilities, no big government takeovers. Yeah, I was shocked to see that China only had 0.28 million. Now, this is what I found. could they own more? And I didn't find it. Yes, but I mean, this is what I dug up, and that shocked me. So the foreign chunk is growing, but it's still dwarfed by the domestic owners. So it brings me to, okay, well, who domestically owns this shit? I don't know. I was curious. It's like, so did the corporations move in and buy this shit? And I was surprised what I found out here too. Again, I don't know shit about farming. I just got interested in it when I seen, they talking about fucking depopulation and shit. So when you shift to overall U.S. farmland, is about 894 million acres operated by farms. And 90% of that is owned by families or individuals. So that's around 804 million acres. And these families' farms handle 95 to 97% of livestock operations, producing mostly beef, dairy, and more. But the scale matters. So the small family farms own 41% of the land, but only 17% of production value, while large family ones punch above their weight. So in the corporate control, this is what surprised me. So corporate control, they only own 10% of ag land, 90 million acres, and it's corporate owned. And in livestock, most land is family owned, but corporate concentration and processing means 20 to 30% of hog and poultry production is under corporate sway by contracts. So what does that mean? So you can own the land, but they're going to get you when you go process your shit. That's where the money's at. Money's not in the land and the farming. The money looks like it's in the processing. And then you got major investors, again, like the big three, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So are they part of any of this? How do they have any ownership? And their direct ownership of the farmland is negligible. They got roughly 0.5% through funds in farmland. So, there's no conspiracy there. Everything seems all up and up, as of this. I mean, nothing to see here. It's just we got some processing places that looks like they're strangling the farmer to get food out, which is rising the cost of our shit, but the people that's doing the work's not getting the money. The only ones getting the money looks like corporate motherfuckers. So yes, it looks like we're supporting our local farmers. And I could be completely fucking wrong, but this is just what you're finding out, and I'm looking through it. And I talked to my brother-in-law who sells shit to farms, and he was telling me how they struggle here in Louisiana, with the exports now because of the tariffs. But I didn't know any of this. And again, I could be completely wrong, but from what I'm seeing, this is fucked up. You sit there, you work your ass off on your farm, and you go to sell, and they lowball your ass, and you got to take what the fuck they're gonna give you because nobody else is gonna fucking buy it, right? I mean, you got all these fucking cows, and they turn around and jack this shit up, and make all kind of fucking money, and the guy that's doing the fucking work is not getting paid. I mean, to me, we back to indentured servitude when you look at shit like that. Well, let me keep going before I get fucking all riled up. Sorry about that. Squirrel. My bad. All right, so there's nothing to see here, right? But ownership is one thing, control is another. That's how you got to look at this, So all the families, like I was just saying, they own that dirt, right? But who calls the shots on what happens on the crops and the cows? So here's where it gets a little fucking. These guys, let me just, yeah. So even if families own 90% of farms, a handful of corporations control the purchases of livestock and farm goods, squeezing the system. So for livestock, beef, pork, and poultry, the big four meat packers, Tyson Foods, Cargill, JBS, which is JBS USA, which is Brazilian owned, and National Beef dominate. They handle 80 to 85% of beef slaughter and 67% of pork. They buy via contracts or spot markets, setting prices that often leave ranchers with scraps, less than 30% of the retail beef dollar. So they get less than 30% of the retail beef. And then for bulk commodities like corn, soybean, cotton, the ABCD traders, Cargill, Archer, McDaniels, Midland, Bunge, and Lewis Dreyfus Company control 50 to 80% of global and U.S. trade. They buy from farmers, process and ship, dictating prices amid global surpluses. So, and the specialty stuff like strawberries, big retailers like Walmart, distributors like Cisco pull strings through contracts for that stuff. So the buyer concentration creates a market where there are fewer buyers and many sellers, forcing down farm gate prices while costs rise. So the result is the farmer incomes tanked in 2024 to 127.8 billion net, rebounding to 179.8 billion in 2025, mostly on government aid, which was 40.5 billion in disaster payments. So we basically inflated what they were doing by giving them money to help with disasters, which, if you got problems, I get it. But if you just look at the numbers, it looks like they've done better. So crops suffer more. So they got declining livestocks, less so. But overall, the farmers' retail share dropped 20% since 1993. All right. So their shit's dropping. And they're not making the money. The processing company's making the money. But who the fuck's controlling them? Right? Because what we see now is never the person that you think it is. It's the fucking Scooby-Doo shit, it's pulling mask off you're constantly pulling fucking mask off in this shit. They have so many layers to everything they fucking do. It's ridiculous. All right. So let's look at who we got. So many of these giants are privately held companies. So Cargill's a huge company, and it's the Cargill McMillan family that own 88 to 90% of that. And they control a lot of your food from what I read. I was pretty interested when I started reading about Cargill. And then Lewis Dreyfus family, they had 55% that they owned. In Abu Dhabi, they own 45%. And in the JBS USA, it's the Bautista family and Brazilian Development Bank. And in the National Beef, it's a Brazilian company that own 82%. So there you go. We got two of them going straight to fucking Brazil. Whatever. But for Publix, traded ones, where do the big three shine? So Tyson Foods, okay, the big three: Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. All right, if you haven't heard that before, they in everything, every fucking thing. They own shit, portions of companies, and they have a controlling amount of when they put in. And not only they invest in all these companies and controlling amounts, they invest in each other. And they got a pretty good web going on. Well, anyway, Tyson Foods, Vanguard owns 13%, BlackRock owns 9%, State Street owns 5%. So they own 27% combined in Tyson Food. ADM, it's Archer Daniels Midland, Vanguard 12%, BlackRock 9%, State Street 7%. So combined, they own 29% of that company. And then Bunge, 34%, but the big three are at 18 to 20% combined. So Glencore owns 34% and leads, but the big three at 18 to 20% combined. So these aren't directly controlling it, but they're passive investors, via ETFs, but their voting power is massive. So they own no less than 20% of the shares of the U.S. Well, let's put it this way: they own 20 to 25% of voting shares across U.S. corporate America, largest than 88% in the S&P 500 firms. And they vote on all these boards, on pay, they shape governance. These people in everything. So in short, the families own most of the farms, but corporate buyers, often family owned, themselves are influenced by the big three. And they control the cash flow, which is hurting incomes. The big three are controlling all of this. You have to dig into who owns everything because our choices are a fucking illusion. Everything is owned by the same people when you pull back all the layers, which is even fucking scarier when you think about it because they control everything. Step out of line or don't follow the new trend and you may lose your farm. Literally. And I hate using the word literally, but it felt good right there. So this means the major players in our economy have all control over our food. And now this couldn't become a way to control us, right? Yeah, because if you own our food, you can't do nothing. You can't control us. All right. So let's talk about how out of touch these people are with us. So just a few weeks ago, we discussed on how out of touch the Trump administration was with the working man because he's constantly telling everybody how great everything is. We aren't seeing all the great shit he's talking about. And I told Jason that Trump's not going to the grocery store. So how the hell would he know the prices? That's why he's out of touch. I mean, he's not going to the motherfucking grocery store. You know what I'm saying? Well, listen to this. All right. This is the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, explain how good we have it. All right. Check this out.
We had run almost 1,000 simulations, and between $3 and $4 is a fair number if you can have access to that food. So just about an hour ago, I saw new numbers that were run. A full day, meaning 3 full square meals and a snack, is about $15.64. $15.64. That's all 3 meals and a snack.
There you go, $15.64. That's all you need. You need all day on $15.64. You can get a tortilla, a bean, a weenie. Who the fuck's eating on 15 cents? They're out of touch, people. They're out of touch. All right. That was the Secretary of Agriculture telling you can eat on $15, $16. Man, these people fucking out of touch. The other night, I thought about the show Miss Evers Boys. And if you haven't seen Miss Evers Boys, it's a really good show. It's about the Tuskegee experiment with syphilis. And it's a fucked up story. It's a true story, but it's really fucked up. But if you haven't seen the movie, again, the movie's called Miss Evers Boys. And it's really good. Well, Jennifer had never seen it, so we watched it the other night. And it got me thinking, how many other experiments we've done on people. And I remember we'd watched a documentary on one about them experimenting on some kids. And so I was thinking, where was I kind of remember where it was at, but I didn't really know. So I was like, fuck, let me go check. And so the way I started looking, the question I was asking was, were there ever experiments performed on orphan or mentally challenged kids? Because I remember it being like mentally challenged kids that they had. And it's, yes, there were multiple documented instances of unethical medical experiments conducted on orphan or mentally disabled children in the United States, particularly during the mid 20th century. This often involved vulnerable population in institutions where informed consent was lacking or non-existent. They were just justified at the time under the guise of scientific advancement. All right. So they don't care if they know. And then the school I was thinking about, it actually found that it was a Willowbrook school in New York. And it was a facility for children with intellectual disabilities. And what they did there, they did hepatitis experiments. They infected children with hepatitis to study the disease and test potential vaccines. This was in the 1950s to the 1970s. I mean, we're not talking very long ago. Children are injected with the virus or fed contaminated materials such as feces mixed into chocolate milk. This involved over 700 children and was led by Dr. Saul Krugman, who argued it was ethical because hepatitis was already rampant in the overcrowded institution. The experiments raised major ethical concerns and contributed to reforms in human subject research. First of all, why do we have to reform human subject research? I mean, yes, if you work on a cadaver, so be it. What are we doing human subject research on? I mean, seriously. And I found multiple ones. I mean, we had this Fernald State School radiation experiment in the 1940s to 1950s. So they had these children they labeled as feeble-minded, right? And they were fed oatmeal laced with radioactive tracers as part of nutrition studies, sponsored by Quaker Oats at MIT. The goal was to track nutrient absorption, but parents were not fully informed about the radiation exposure. This was part of a broader Cold War era radiation research on institutionalized children. Okay? Now tell me right now that medical has not been fucking with kids all this time. I mean, we tested it on air, and now we're taking kids and, trying to make, they got doctors trying to make these kids transform into, another sex. I mean, it's just another one of these fucking experiments when you think about it. It's fucked up. Stay out of that shit. That's not normal. It's not normal. Let them grow up. This other one, they were shocking kids. It was what they had. There was electroconvulsive therapy. So they had many orphans, and they were treatment was experimental, but often repeated daily with reports of severe side effects. And the funding may have included the CIA involvement through MK Ultra programs. Okay, so they were just shocking these fucking kids. The monster study on stuttering. All right, check this one out. At the University of Iowa, researchers including Wendell Johnson conducted an experiment on 22 orphan children, half of whom had no speech issues. They subjected the children to negative reinforcement, belittling their speech to induce stuttering, and test if it was a learned behavior. This caused lasting psychological harm. Some of them that participated. They they stress these fucking kids out so much to make them stutter. Tell me that is not fucking evil. And it goes on. They got the ringworm and scalp experiment in the 1950s, 1960s, X-ray experiments on orphans in the 1910s and 1920s, malaria and other infections in the 1940s, HIV drug trials in the 1980s and 1990s. I mean, these experiments were part of a broader pattern of unethical human research in the U.S., often targeting marginalized groups like institutionalized children, prisoners, and minorities. This isn't our fucking country, people. This isn't our country. And I'm not telling you this, to fucking scare you or anything. This is it. I mean, this comes back to what I was saying the other night about Epstein. You think that you know these people, and that there's no way that they could have went to Rape Island because you see them on television, you see them giving speeches, and you think you know these people. These people doing these fucking experiments, I mean, they're getting money from somebody to conduct these experiments that, where do you think that's coming from? All of these people are fucking evil. They want power, and they show right there that they have no empathy for people. And they did this on adults too. They had many experiments on adults. It's just, and what was sad on the ones on adults, they were using the mental patients. So they had the experiments on mentally ill adults. The mentally ill patients in asylums and hospitals were often subject to experiments due to the institutionalization and perceived lack of agency. This included infectious diseases studies, psychiatric interventions, and radiation tests with little regard or informed consent for potential harm. So there was a hepatitis exposure experiment on these people in the 1940s and the 1950s. They had a flu virus and vaccine test in the 1940s. They did the psychiatric electrode implants in the 1950s and the 1970s. And this is the one that gets me, because if you ever seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you remember lobotomies. And they were doing lobotomies from the 1930s and the 1950s. And this is where they cut out your prefrontal lobe in your brain. And they were performed on thousands of mentally ill patients, often without consent, to treat conditions like schizophrenia. And Dr. Walter Freeman popularized what they called the ice pick method. And that led to changes in personalities and seizures and death. Mostly, they said it was 50,000 procedures occurred in the U.S. And that that made those people, from what I said and seen and what I read, it pretty much made them a vegetable. You know, they were no use to anyone. At that point, if you're going to do that to somebody, why not just kill them? Because you put more work on yourself, other than the fact that you were making them a vegetable and the government was paying you for having that body there, and now you don't have to deal with them. I mean, is that one way we look at it? But that don't make any sense, you know? And then they had this radiation and plutonium injections in the 1940s and the 1950s. This was under the Manhattan Project. But, you know, they say that these experiments contributed to medical knowledge. Huh? And then that was the insane asylums. How about the prisoners? The prisoners had Holmesburg Prison dermatology tests in the 1950s to 1970s. So they exposed over 1,000 inmates to skin blistering chemicals. It's not funny, but goddamn, the test caused scarring, pain, and long-term health issues. But inmates, they were paid minimally, but not informed of risk. Then they had the California Medical Facility experiments. That was another dermatology one. They were tested with they were spraying them with fucking pesticides and herbicides, and then injected them shit into their veins. Many suffered burns, infections, and organ damage. The university apologized in 2022, acknowledging it was unethical. Thanks. How about this motherfucker? The gonorrhea and STD studies. That was at an Atlanta penitentiary, infected 24 inmates with gonorrhea and penis injections to test treatments. It was similar to the backed experiments in Guatemala of infected prisoners with syphilis. Gotta love this one. Testicular implants and sterilizations in the 1910s and the 1950s. This was done in San Quentin. They extracted the testicles from executed prisoners and implanted them into living inmates for rejuvenation studies. They took your balls from you and stuck some dead man's balls in you. So this says, Dr. Leo Stanley extracted testicles from one executed prisoner and implanted them into living inmates for rejuvenation studies. That is fucked up. Radiation and cancer cell injections. That was prisoners in Washington and Oregon subject to testicular radiation. What is up with your balls? What? And then they had the waterboarding and enhanced interrogation. So these people are sinister. Like, don't sit here and think that they're not thinking in ways that you can't conceive, because I can't conceive the way that they're thinking. And I'm sure a lot of you can't conceive that. Now, I can balance the way they're thinking because I just find it interesting. It doesn't haunt me. I understand it might haunt some people. They don't find this interesting. They find this as, demonic or disturbing. Then I apologize. But this is history. I mean, I'm not making anything up. So I wanted a little bit more about that ice pick method, because I was just curious. I mean, did they just take an ice pick and just jam it in their head? But it refers to the transorbital lobotomy. It's controversial and now discredited procedure popularized by American neurologist and psychiatrist Dr. Walter Freeman in the mid-20th century. Freeman developed this simplified version of the earlier prefrontal lobotomy and to make it faster, cheaper, and accessible outside operating rooms, often performed by psychiatrists without surgical training. They performed the first one, standard lobotomy in the U.S. in 1936 with a neurosurgeon, James Watts, involving drilling holes into the skull to sever the frontal lobe connections. By 1945 to 1946, inspired by Italian psychiatrist, I can't even say his name, Amaro Fidelibe, transorbital approach, and reportedly even his own kitchen ice pick. Freeman created a less invasive method. He initially tested on cadavers using a household ice pick before designing a specialized tool called an orbital clasp, a slender, sharp metal rod resembling an ice pick, about 8 to 9 inches long with a blunt handle. And the first time they did this ice pick method was in January 17th, 1946. Yep. There was an old 29-year-old housewife named Sally Ellen. He went on to perform 2,500 to 3,500 more of these procedures. Now, I can go through the steps, but I ain't. But I mean, they got sedation and positioning and access and the penetration, severing connections, repeat on other side, post procedures. I mean, they got it all in here. All. But the patients, they just became zombies. It made no sense to do that to somebody. It really didn't. It didn't benefit anyone other than the person receiving the money. That's all it benefited. It's sad. It's sad. Well, all I can say, guys, is there was a lot of bad shit, that happened, and I still believe we live in the greatest country in the world. But we got to take this bitch back. I don't know how else to do it but us talking and understanding that these people, they can be what you don't want to see, I guess is what I'm getting at. You can't believe the facade all the time. You got to get to the nuts and bolts of somebody and really see what they're trying to do to you. And I don't believe everybody's bad. I believe a lot of people in this world are good. I just believe that the good people aren't willing to push back as much as the bad people, and the small majority of the bad people are just able to do what they want to do because they're louder. They're more aggressive. And we're comfortable. I don't know how we get out of being comfortable. I ain't gonna lie, I like being comfortable myself. But at some point, we're gonna have to say, "Hey, look, can we at least all just talk and see what we're gonna do about this?" Because everybody ain't getting along in the schoolyard. All right, so what I'm gonna do right now, I'm gonna play this one last video, and then this guy states exactly what is needed.
Let's just take a look at this.
All of us can keep arguing about right and fucking left, but none of the issues in this country are actually going to get resolved until we fix these three fucking things. You ready? Number one, we have to put an end or at least heavily regulate corporate lobbying. Because our voices don't mean shit when corporations are free to spend billions of dollars a year influencing our politicians and the decisions that are made on Capitol Hill. Which leads me to number two. We have to fucking have term limits for every elected official. 2 terms, max. Because public service shouldn't be a lifelong fucking hustle. And while politicians are in office, no private investing. You are there to serve, not to get rich. And if you don't fucking like that, good, don't run for office. Remember, politicians are supposed to serve we the people, not fucking corporations. Which leads me to number 3. Neither of those first 2 things happen until we grow some fucking balls and start holding politicians accountable. They don't fear us. They don't respect us. They sit there watching us fucking argue amongst ourselves. And then they use the media to scare all the fucking weak people in our society into thinking those people are the fucking enemy. Remember, even our founding fathers knew that the government was the enemy. That's the whole reason the fucking Constitution exists. To limit their power, not ours. Playing identity politics and voting for the same fake-ass two-party system and arguing over the same shit we have been for fucking decades ain't gonna fix our fucking problems. And before you fucking say it, this isn't because of capitalism. It's because our society has become fucking weak and has allowed politicians to do whatever the fuck they want. So me personally, I'm fucking done arguing over capitalism versus socialism or fucking immigration and ICE raids or the cost of our fucking health insurance. Because until we fix the actual foundation of the United States of America, none of those arguments fucking matter.
Yeah, man, I agree with everything that man got to say. I mean, we all have to get together. I mean, we the people. We are the people. You gotta put those little petty differences aside and come together, guys. Gotta come together. Well, I enjoyed myself tonight. I hope y'all enjoyed this. Like, share, follow, comment. You know, if you want something, want us to do something, want us to talk about something, let me know. You know, I enjoy doing this shit. I love, people interacting, and we'll see you again next week. This is Sense and Senseless. I'm Bryan. Deuces.